I read my very first book that I didn't have to read for school. That's like a big girl chapter thick book.
This is a student we're calling Cameron. We spoke to her this spring when she was a high school senior in Oregon.
And I was extremely proud of myself because that's not something that normally interests me because it's so difficult. But Mr. Williams also contributed to that. And I just picked it up because I was interested in it. And I read it all the way through. And it was the very first time.
The reason Cameron is proud of herself is she has dyslexia, and reading is hard work.
I have to put a lot of energy into really understanding what I'm reading. I also have ADHD, so that makes it extremely hard to also concentrate.
She mentioned Mr. Williams. That's James Williams, her English teacher. She loves his class.
Get in the habit of being concise. If it were me, I would write Ken Kesey's ideas, and then bullet point.
He teaches in sort of a way that's very different from a lot of my other teachers.
You've got good ideas about this. Write down.
Is it because of I'm kind of repeating myself?
He tries to get everybody involved, everyone talking, yada yada.
Something? Kellen, help us out. What does he want us to think about? How society?
I said society, and
what about society?
People aren't really members of society. They were taken out of society because they couldn't fit in.
And how are they treated? These people?
They're treated like they're like.
A lot of us find it hard to raise our hand and talk out loud and do all of those spontaneous, confident things. And Mr. Williams kind of doesn't give us the option to be nervous because he creates kind of an environment that we're just talking. It's not really a classroom.
I think he's kind of talking about all people that might not be exactly what society tries to cut you down and shave you into as
Kellen Rather, everybody.
And
don't you think?
I think so. Yeah.
Surely he's not trying to just be there's some people.
Mr. Williams doesn't really like ChatGPT, and he tries to keep his students from using AI to replace thinking.
It's a constant nag or minor stressor in my life. How can I create this assignment so that someone can't just go home and ChatGPT it? I try to assign pretty AI-resistant writing assignments.
Recently, Mr. Williams gave the class an assignment that Cameron found tricky.
It was a very open-ended assignment, which sometimes I love when I know kind of what I want to talk about. I definitely think of myself as more of a creative person, but I think it's hard to sometimes get there in the very beginning. I knew kind of how I wanted the story to start and how I wanted it to end, but I just had no idea the juices and how to make it something that, is actually interesting to read.
Cameron says it was daunting, and she felt that AI would help her get unstuck.
There was people around me who were like, just use AI, chat GPT it, and you don't even have to deal with it. Just tell them to make up a story. And I was like, well, for me personally, I didn't want to get caught and ask for forgiveness. I wanted to be straightforward and ask for permission. So I asked Mr. Williams, I was like, as long as I have an outline, can I ask AI to give me a bunch of ideas for how to make the story a little bit more rocky?
Mr. Williams says that he'd actually been wanting to encourage students to use AI in a way that wouldn't just do all the work for them, but would augment their thinking. So he said yes.
And I told her some quick tips about how I would use it for that and gave her the green light. And I think she used it to good effect.
I put in my character, all of her things, 10 different things she could have gone through. And so it popped out. It said scenario 1, she got neglected as a child. It was very broad at first. Scenario 2, she was in foster care,
Cameron says she chose the neglected as a child option and drilled down on that idea. And she says it got her going again, past her writer's block to where she wanted to be, where her creative brain could take over. I'm Jesse Dukes. I have Justin Reich with me. Justin, what do you hear in that opening story?
Well, it's terrific to hear about the relationship that Cameron and Mr. Williams has. It reminds me of a kind of classic tutorial relationship. It makes me think that AI plays an important role in that story in that it gives Cameron some tools that she finds useful for getting her unblocked. But maybe it's really a story about the relationship and the kind of conditions that you need to create in order for an AI tool to potentially be useful in a classroom.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, our colleague Chris Bagg spent 2 hours in James Williams' classroom observing his teaching. You heard a little bit of that audio from that. I've listened to all of it, and I can just say he is just constantly praising his students, asking for their opinions, challenging kindly their opinions, but also really making it clear that he thinks they have something to say, that they're capable of critical thinking, and that he's interested in what they have to say. And, Cameron was very explicit that she trusts Mr. Williams. She might not have gone to any other teacher and asked to use AI on the assignment, but she told me that early on in the year, she'd talked with him about her dyslexia and ADHD, and he'd responded really well.
Mr. Williams was so sweet. He was like, I'm not normally told I'm a confident person because I get so shy and anxious and nervous, but he gave me a cute little compliment about me being confident and how he can tell that I'm going to try hard and be honest and all these things. And there was something about the way that he was honest with me and told me all of that that just made me feel comfortable with talking to him.
I'm Jesse Dukes. This is The Homework Machine. And Justin, one of the taglines for our series is that while most education technologies are invited into schools, AI crashed the party. And we've heard horror stories from teachers and students of AI cheating or false accusations and confusions. But some teachers think AI has been great for schools. Others are more ambivalent, but think AI has some potential. Throughout our reporting, we've heard from veteran teachers who are experimenting with ways of using AI, and some of them say they found an approach or practice that leads to good learning. So that's what today's episode is about.
Anywhere we can find better approaches to good learning, we should be looking for them. So I'm excited for this.
Now, you know more about educational theory and pedagogy and history than I do. With Cameron and Mr. Williams, you mentioned that there was this set of conditions that had to be in place for that to happen. And I suspect that there's a pattern we'll sense in these stories that I'm going to share with you. So I'm hoping you can help us articulate what's going on in terms of what those conditions are a little bit more clearly as we go through these examples.
Well, one of the ways I've framed this in the past is that technologies are only as powerful as the communities that guide their use. In order for a new tool to be useful, it's not because the tool by itself has particular qualities, but it's because students and teachers and family have learned something about using new technologies, and together they're able to figure out ways of making them more useful.
Well, after a break, we'll talk with a veteran teacher who uses AI to help plan lessons and classroom activities. That's coming up.
Much of what we once imagined about the future is here.
Pocket-sized radio instruments will enable individuals to communicate with anyone, anywhere.
But this reshaped reality is also filled with thorny questions that aren't so easy to navigate. Welcome to Shift, a new weekly podcast from PRX.
I present to you Electro, the Moto Man. Ladies and gentlemen.
I would say that one of my greatest skills is my ability to interact with humans.
I'm your host, Jennifer Strong. You can learn more at shiftshow.ai.
One of the ways that teachers talk about AI supporting their work is in lesson planning or generating specific curricula. And I'd say the most enthusiastic proponent of this kind of AI use among the teachers we've spoken to is Eric Timmons. He teaches at Santa Ana High School, which is part of the Santa Ana Unified School District. And it has a reputation for being technology forward and experimenting with AI. The district is in Orange County, south of Los Angeles. Most of the students are Latino or Hispanic, and about 3/4 qualify for free or reduced lunch. Eric Timmons usually has his students for 4 years, and he teaches filmmaking.
It is a progressive pathway that starts with narrative filmmaking, then goes to episodic filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, and then finally ends with experimental filmmaking.
Wow.
And by the time students graduate, they are capable of producing short films on their own. We focus heavily on literacy and storytelling.
That's I really wish there's been a program like that in
Right? Me
high
too.
school. Eric is really committed to project-based learning. He's a fan of PBL Works, the nonprofit that publishes a lot of guidance on project-based learning. But he also feels like he doesn't have time to incorporate every idea that he comes across.
There's so many things that I've encountered where I'm like, I would love to do that, but it takes so much work and it takes so much time. And I'll be honest, like as a teacher, there's like sometimes a feeling of like, well, you know what? Like, I'm not a curriculum designer. Like, should I be going and doing all of this work for free, you know? But at the end of the day, it's not going to happen. So I have to do it, right?
Right. Eric told me he's long wanted to incorporate thinking routines from Project Zero, a research group at Harvard that publishes a lot of guidance for teachers. Some of Eric's students were reading an article about gentrification in Santa Ana. It's not part of any formal curriculum. It's an article he just found. He wanted some questions for an in-class discussion, so he turned to ChatGPT.
This is where I said, I want you to design a lesson and use Project Zero, use the best fitting Project Zero thinking routine for this lesson. So instead of me...
ChatGPT made these suggestions and he went through and edited the ones that he thought worked best for his students.
So you can see so 4th Street is kind of like our main downtown area that is being gentrified.
Eric showed me the slides that he used with his students and some notes that he took about the responses to these discussion questions.
4th Street business, streetcar, 2 questions. How does it affect the community? Why did it happen? 1 simile, cultural changes in Santa Ana are like a roller coaster because they are happening quickly. There are ups and downs.
You know, he was thrilled. He thought that the activity went really, really well.
Article that they read and the discussion we had, and then why don't they think of us is a powerful question.
And he says he might have been able to do the same thing on his own without ChatGPT, but like many of the teachers we've talked to, he's already often working at 8 p.m. or later, giving his students feedback. And something that might have taken him a half hour or longer, he got done in just a couple minutes with ChatGPT.
Being able to work with the smartest curriculum designer that's ever existed and have that at my disposal is incredible.
Well, I want to start by noticing that there's a lot that Eric puts into this as an expert that seems to make it work. So he doesn't just say, hey, find lesson stuff. He says, hey, I know that Project Zero from the Harvard Graduate School of Education does really great teaching strategy work. And so I want to narrow down the field of everything you've ever looked at ChatGPT for teaching strategies to just this subset of teaching strategies. And so with those constraints, he says, okay, take this article and map it in a curriculum design way against a couple of other things. And because he's an expert, he's able to recognize which of these are good, reasonable outputs and which of them are not. It's very easy to imagine someone with less expertise not making all those crucial pieces of input, not being able to distinguish amongst the quality of output. But it's really fun to watch experts take their expertise and partner with this tool and come up with things that they're really excited about. Part of why this feels like a really reasonable strategy for Eric to pursue is there are so few teachers in the country who are teaching a multi-year sequence of filmmaking. There's not curriculum for him to turn to. I have much more caution hearing stories of teachers doing the same thing with a 7th grade pre-algebra curriculum where they're making stuff up from scratch, because there are many, many smart people across the country and across the world who have thought a lot about what a good 7th grade pre-algebra lesson looks like. But if Eric is doing something really special in this school, then it makes a lot of sense for him to be tackling it on his own. And it's neat how excited he is about these tools he has to help him.
So we can start building the forms. He doesn't think Mesh AI will work because...
So I got to visit his classroom and see him interacting with his documentary film students, the juniors.
Large, and it'll end up looking like Roblox or Minecraft. And we don't want that. What about your live action aspects? Is that all done?
Almost done. It's the lineups and stuff.
So you've wrapped on the actual live action. Yeah. It's done. Yeah. The key, everything is all done?
Eric Timmons is one of the few teachers we've spoke to who actively encourages his students to use generative AI like ChatGPT. His students they're all at different phases in their filmmaking projects, and he'll give them script notes or help them when they get stuck.
So the notes I gave you, what I did was I uploaded it and then asked for feedback. And so with ChatGPT, so it gave you the feedback.
But sometimes he'll say, try turning to ChatGPT when you get stuck. I spoke to one of the students in his documentary filmmaking class, Alvin Gonzalez, about this.
I did a documentary about gentrification, and one of the challenges I come across when I'm making a documentary is the questions. So I've never really excelled in English, so it's hard coming up with different questions and writing them down. So I research who I'm gonna interview, and I use AI like ChatGPT to inform it and kind of set up questions for me. So then from there, it gives me a set of questions. So I'm looking at the questions, thinking if they sound good, and if they don't, then I ask to regenerate, and I take the ones that I think are important and would help me out with my topic.
Alvin is still doing a lot of the work. He conducts the interview, he does the filming, he's recording the audio himself. He takes whatever he gets, he edits all of that into his film.
So Alvin, you have your project. Where do you stand with that right now? What are you currently working on?
I want to interview Abraham's mom.
Interview Abraham's mom, and then also...
When it comes to using ChatGPT, Eric Timmons says he's pretty open, but what he tells his students is to try to use it to do part of a bigger whole. He's confident that most of the ways they'll use AI will not harm their learning. It will just help them get to the richer parts of the project.
AI can replace the things you don't want to do. They don't like formatting a screenplay to Hollywood standards. They don't enjoy that. No one's like, oh, I love hitting the space bar this many times or, doing these things. And honestly, most people are using expensive software to do that anyway. My students love to make movies. They enjoy the editing process. They enjoy coming up with a story, right? So why would they replace that with AI?
It's just such a wonderful example, and I think Eric really gets at the heart of it when he says, I've got them doing things they love. I don't have to worry about students using ChatGPT to bypass thinking because I get to teach them a bunch of thinking that they love to do. So that sounds terrific to me. And, in order to do this really cool thinking, you sometimes have to do this drudgery. If we can make machines do drudgery for us so that we have more time to spend on beautiful artistic thinking, that's what we want to have happen in the world.
Justin, many entrepreneurs and educators have said that AI can give student feedback on writing. And I have talked to students who will ask ChatGPT to read their essay drafts and make suggestions. There's also an idea out there that a teacher could mediate that feedback process by using AI to generate feedback for students or coaching the students through that process. So this is from a Columbia University training video for instructors.
For giving feedback on rough drafts of student work, you might consider leveraging AI as a tutor for students. Integrating AI-generated feedback into the writing process can create an additional layer of a scaffolded learning experience where multiple sources
And it's not just ChatGPT. All the commercially available AI-powered edtech suites like School AI and Conmigo offered structured feedback to students' writing. And there are dozens of smaller AI startups that specialize on writing feedback for students. And I have to admit, this creeps me out a little. But if I remember correctly, it's not really new.
No, people have been trying to build machines that can score essays, that can provide feedback for a long time now. 10 or 15 years ago, there was a real surge of interest in using machine learning algorithms, sort of prediction-oriented AI, to be able to do this kind of thing. And it may be that new generative AI tools can do a better job than what previous generations of the technology were able to do.
Well, I did talk to a teacher who has been experimenting with using AI for feedback. Logan Brown teaches 10th grade students at Morton East High School in Cicero, Illinois, near Chicago. Like Eric Timmons' students, his students are mostly Latino, working class, and he shares a lot of the same concerns over cheating we've heard from other teachers. But he also wonders if there might be positive uses for AI. So he's tried it out at evaluating his students' writing and giving them feedback more efficiently than he can on his own. He says the key is being very specific.
I want to zoom in on a certain type of feedback, right? I want to just give thesis feedback here on.
So he'll ask ChatGPT for feedback on the student's thesis statement midway through a writing project.
right? And you'd be like, hey, I am trying to evaluate students on their opening paragraph. But just to give students feedback like on an outline or something like that.
Logan says he's experimented with ChatGPT enough that sometimes he'll direct all of his students to use it to get early feedback on writing they're working on in class.
That's something that like just that immediate feedback. As the English teachers, we're always struggling for that because like now I have 150 students, right? So if I wanted to give everybody feedback on their thesis, I can't do that in 5 minutes, right? But if I had the AI prompt where I'm like, I trust this, it will give them feedback. But and it has to be on something small, right? It can't be like, here's a rhetorical analysis essay. It has to be on something like just focus in on their thesis and did they provide 3 supporting arguments.
And he says usually the feedback ChatGPT gives his students is pretty good, but sometimes it might be wrong. Like it might say, you didn't include 3 supporting examples for your argument, when in fact the student did.
And then they'll bring it to me, and sometimes I'm like, let's take a look at it. And I'm like, well, this is a little bit off. I see that you did this, this, and this. You're on the right track. I mean, that rarely happens, right? And it's also a great way to get a conversation started with students.
We know for sure that feedback is a really important part of the learning process. We know that when students create complex artifacts, it's really hard to give them timely feedback.
Yeah, he said he has 150 students, which I'm assuming 5 English classes with 30 students or something like that.
Yeah, 5 and 30 would be a totally normal load. Providing feedback on 150 essays is an insane amount of time. Then feedback on 150 drafts, and then final feedback on 150 more drafts. It's just a vast, vast, vast amount of time. And there's lots of reason to believe that if we could give students more iterative feedback, they would benefit from that. So there's something really promising in what Logan is getting at here. Let's find something that I think the bot does well, that is relevant to students improving. Sometimes I will be the applier of the bot. It sounds like sometimes he gets students to be the applier of the bot. However, everybody, put this prompt into your machine and then put your work into the machine and see what it tells you. I think the enormous risk lurking behind it is that in very powerful ways, students write because they care what their teachers think. Even the act of writing in very fundamental ways depends on audience, and machines are not an audience. There's all kinds of things machines can do to process text, but they can probably never really be an audience in the way that having another consciousness engage your ideas just matters to human beings. And of course, students are, if they're not just using ChatGPT to write their essays, they're using these tools to give them feedback on their work. And so there's lots of reasons to believe that if teachers show students more and less effective ways of using machines to give feedback on our writing, then that could be a great boon to writing.
Well, Justin, another thing some teachers are doing is encouraging students to really explore AI's various capacities. Some of the things it seems to be good at, like in the next case, writing code or software. Our colleague Andrew Parsons spoke to Jerry Shaw at Beverly High School in Massachusetts. He's an engineering teacher.
I'm not looking to interject AI into every single unit I have. It's trying to find which places it fits the best.
Jerry is an electrical engineer by education. Before he got into teaching, he actually worked as an engineer in nuclear power and data centers, and he draws heavily on his background working in industrial settings.
Luckily, by having some of that background in the automation world with manufacturing, gave some insight as to how to possibly approach some of these things, how to work with it rather than try and be afraid of it or work against it, because we realized it is going to become part of this world. Just like you wouldn't teach students how to, only use the old manufacturing techniques of machining by hand. You need to teach them how to use the computer integrated parts they're going to be working with and having to troubleshoot. Same thing with AI.
So there's a kind of programming activity that he does with his students in which he encourages them to use AI. His students are working with Arduino Unos, which are these very rudimentary computers, basically just a circuit board that can be programmed to control a few simple electronic machines like LEDs, a speaker, things like that.
So I present with them basically the task that they have to create something that is going to blink in Morse code SOS. Most of them have never dealt with Morse code before, so they don't know how to do that. And some of them don't even know how to make the LED blink on the Arduino itself.
Jerry's students see if they can get the Arduino Uno to make its LED blink messages in Morse code. If that doesn't work, they're troubleshooting it using AI, and once they get the hang of that, he ups the challenge level.
It starts getting more and more complicated. We start off with playing songs, where this is the first time they have to prompt it on their own to create a song, and they choose any song they would like in the world. Sometimes the prompts they give it will give them code that will work perfectly, and sometimes they'll get code back that won't work at all. They work through that, seeing some of the different challenges with that. Or they learn how to go back and prompt it again for better responses. But it's just a way to progressively get more and more towards that idea of how do you use AI to help you with your coding or to create above and beyond what you could on your own.
Jerry says that he had a student who really enjoyed this activity, and he wanted to get the Arduino Unos to play more than one note at a time, to play, chords. And they are not designed to do that. So the student actually worked with several different coding assistants, not just ChatGPT, but there are these other bots out there like Google Code Assist, Claude's Sonnet 3.5, GitHub's Copilot, and many others, and often you can use them a certain number of times for free before you have to pay. So he used 3 different ones so he wouldn't have to pay, and he had these different AI tools fact-checking and debugging one another.
It helped him devise a way to use, instead of just one Arduino Uno, using 3 different ones that could talk to one another, play on 3 different speakers all at the same time. It was pretty crazy, and he really went a deep dive into it, but it was pretty neat in the end what he was able to produce.
Jerry says his goals with this kind of in-class exercise are twofold. He wants his students to learn about electronics and computer programming and circuits, but also he wants them to start developing some skills in using AI to augment their human abilities.
To not just use it to be a lazy way out of things, a way to actually help improve what they're actually doing, just like we use computers and word processing and typing. Any technology that we use this day, ways to use it and integrate into their lives effectively and efficiently.
I mean, it just sounds awesome. Anytime you've got that moment where a student is taking a thing and just running with it past what you imagined, what was possible, that's incredibly exciting as an educator or mentor. I'm sure that Jerry Shaw doesn't care that much about how much people remember about Arduino coding. Probably cares a lot more about, are there some things about coding they get? Do they understand projects? Do they understand how to get things done in the world, how to collaborate with each other, how to evaluate it? Troubleshooting.
It didn't work. So what do we do now?
So now it's ask the machine again, ask a couple of the machines, those kinds of things. And then, we also might find that across school systems, a kid who has a really great 12-year education might take one of these kinds of classes with Eric or Jerry where it's like AI all the way, do whatever, go nuts. And you might take another class where the instructor says, we really don't do a lot of AI here. We really spend a lot of time talking with each other, a lot of time writing by hand, and we're just present with each other. And one could imagine a great education having a combination of those things potentially.
Justin, since I've been working on this episode, I've been thinking about our first story, the one we kicked off the episode with Cameron, the student who had writer's block, and James William, her teacher. Because teachers have helped students deal with writer's block for a long time before ChatGPT. There are all sorts of interventions, like they could have brainstormed ideas together, one-on-one. Mr. Williams could have grabbed another student and, pulled them aside and asked them to brainstorm together. They could have talked about how other writers have handled similar situations. So I wanted to know what Cameron found so helpful about AI specifically, and to what degree it was about getting good suggestions, whether it also had something to do with her anxiety around writing. So I actually sent her that question in an email, and she very kindly sent me this very thoughtful voice memo that I want to play for you. And, it's a little bit long, but I think it's worth hearing the whole thing because she's working to articulate her thoughts.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you so much for reaching out, and I hope this is not too late. I really think that I've come to the conclusion that I used AI because I wasn't ready for my piece to be out in the world and be seen by teachers and peers. And I was at a point where I was completely stuck with my writer's block, and I didn't want anybody else to judge me based off the writing that I had on my doc. And AI was something that wasn't going to judge me. It wasn't going to be like, she's not a great writer, like she needs a lot of help, like there needs to be a lot of editing, a lot of this, a lot of that. It was just, here's some of my ideas, what do you think? And it was just like AI was kind of just like, okay, this is great, I love what you have so far. And it was just a whole nother way to kind of get my mind moving again. And saying it out loud, I can't tell if it's cheating or not, because I think that writer's block is really important to a story. And I think after writer's block is when the story really becomes the story, because writer's block is really just you having to sit and think about your ideas and then decide. And I think that that is the important part to making a story so raw and real and good, is that writer's block. But personally, at the time, I could not get past it. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful piece of self-awareness. It's neat to listen to a student say, I'm pretty sure this is the kind of support that I need. And even if it's a little controversial, I'm going to go out and try to get this kind of support. There are lots of times as an educator that I could imagine receiving that request and being like, this is great. You think you know what you need? And it seems like a perfectly reasonable thing. Like, let's help you get what you need. Carry on. I am struck that in my work with young researchers over the last decade, one of the most important things that I do is try to explain to them that they cannot wait until things are well refined to share their work with others. So if Cameron had been one of my postdoctoral researchers or PhD students and brought that to me, I would not have been supportive. I would have been like, nope, we're going to figure out how to make you comfortable sharing your works in progress, which is just to say that depending upon what learning goal you have, you choose different pathways and different tools to support them.
I think one of the things that's striking is Cameron's ambivalence about this too. You didn't interact with her, but if you had, I think she's saying, you're right, Justin. Yep. I do need to learn how to work through my writing, my writer's block. And that's really important. And I don't know if using AI was the right thing for me to do in that case or not, which I think is really striking and really human. I think the other thing that I find really interesting there, though, is, for some students and for some young people, AI might be safer. Interacting with an AI chatbot might be safer than interacting with a peer or interacting with a teacher. And we know that we're in an era of relatively high anxiety. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts of this idea that AI might provide kind of a safe harbor for a student who's got social anxiety of some kind, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
So that space to think free of criticism seems like a long established human need. I've known teachers that have folks do journaling exercises where the students mark, like with a Post-it note or something, which pieces they want their teachers to look at. So it becomes this sort of semi-private dialogue. As an educational researcher, another way I think about this is not always how does this interact with an individual student, but how does this interact with students on average? If we make this accessible not to one student, but to the 150 students that maybe Mr. Williams has to teach, on average, is this a tool that helps their writing improve, or is it a tool that doesn't really have an effect on their writing, but does maybe have a negative effect on their comfort with having social interactions and things like that? So in general, it all sounds good. Then the question is, all right, when we have lots of students who engage in these kinds of protocols, do we actually see the benefits? Do we actually see the harms? What are actually the balance of those things?
I mean, I do think that there are a lot of students who, I would say probably more in college than high school, but in the upper levels of K-12 into college, who would say, I don't cheat using AI, but use AI in the way that Cameron is describing all the time. You know, I think we're hearing more and more of that. And I guess, like, I can't really tell if you're saying, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, importantly, we do not know. We
Right.
can make some guesses right now. We could say, like, here are some learning principles that align with that being a good thing. Like, one learning principle might be more feedback is better. If there's a group of students that will take in and process more feedback through a GPT plus a human than through a human alone, then more feedback is better. A second principle might be we write for audiences. Like, in addition to people's writing fluency, we need to have their confidence showing their drafts to others, because it's only other people that are going to really be able to help us say whether or not a piece of writing is accomplishing the goals that it needs to accomplish in the community that it's produced in and things like that. In which case, if students lose the ability to share with others by turning more towards a GPT, then that would potentially be a real loss. Or we could find things like GPTs either give bad feedback or they give homogenizing feedback. When we're looking at almost any teaching practice, it's not hard to fish around and find some learning principle that potentially supports it. The challenge is then collecting evidence to say, okay, we thought this practice was informed by this principle, but like, in reality, did it work the way we wanted it to? What I think is so exciting about the stories that you've collected here, Jesse, with our reporter colleagues, is that if I had to bet where the most exciting practices, the most effective practices with AI and education were going to come from, I would not, in the next couple of years, bet on education researchers. I would not necessarily bet on folks who work in policy shops or live in Washington, D.C.
You wouldn't bet on your team.
I wouldn't bet. I would bet on classroom educators. I would bet on the people who have to do this work day in and day out. I think listening to them is enormously important. They're not all coming up with great ideas. Some of the things that classroom educators are coming up with are not good ideas, and we're going to look back at them and be like, we got to stop doing that because it doesn't help students learn. But I also believe that some of the stories that we've heard, that we've tried to tell, are of educators who are on to something really important. And I think a great thing that education researchers, that policy folks will be doing now is saying, what is it that classroom educators are trying, and can we help them get some initial evidence on whether or not it's working? But until that cavalry arrives, I also think classroom educators should be asking themselves, can we devote some of our time, some of our classroom planning time, some of our curriculum development time to saying, we're trying these experiments, we're going to document these experiments a little bit, and we're going to try to figure out, did this change the way students learn, and did it change in ways that we think there's some evidence looking at student work products, looking at them doing things with tools, looking at them doing things without AI tools, where you can say, oh, this seems to be improving the learning experience. And it's not just because I feel that way, it's not just because a student told me, but because I was looking closely at what they were doing. There's really some evidence here that some good learning is happening.
Teachers, school leaders, if you want to take up Justin's challenge to evaluate the promising experiments with using AI to support learning, we have some resources for that. We have protocols for evaluating student work and other resources around assessing education practice. We'll put a link in our show notes as well as at teachlabpodcast.com. Now, coming up next time, there is a lot of enthusiasm among entrepreneurs and school leaders around AI right now. But some teachers tell us it's frustrating to see resources go into this futuristic, unproven technology when their schools have very real, very low-tech immediate needs.
Why is it that my friend who was an upper-level, manager at Google can go to work and can get fed sushi and filet mignon, and I can't even wash my hands in hot water? How many millions of dollars are we spending on creating ChatGPT, and we can't even give my students hot water?
That's next time on The Homework Machine. This episode was produced by me, Jesse Dukes. We had editing from Alexandra Solomon and Ruxandra Guidi. Reporting and research from Chris Bagg and Andrew Parsons. Additional reporting from Andrew Merriweather, Holly McDeed, Natasha Esteves, and Marnette Federis. Sound design and music supervision by Steven Jackson. Thanks to Jerry Shaw for digging up some of those Arduino Uno songs. The Uptown Funk was a simulation we created in our studios. Production help from Yebu G, data analysis from Mani Ngozi Namani and Manasa Kadumu. Administrative support from Jessica Rondon. Special thanks to Josh Sheldon and Eric Klopfer. The research and reporting you heard in this episode was supported by the Spencer Foundation, the Kapor Foundation, the Jameel World Education Lab, the Social and Ethical Responsibility of Computing Initiative at MIT, and the RAISE Initiative, Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education, also at MIT. And we had support from a company that makes artificial intelligence, Google's Academic Research Awards program. OpenAI, you guys want in on this? Meta? Anthropic? The Homework Machine is a program of the Teaching Systems Lab, Justin Reich Director, located at MIT, known far and wide as the place where you can always find a fresh banana. It's true. Just ask ChatGPT, and then fact check.